everyone, or good morning if you are joining us in another time zone or watching the webinar replay, and welcome to another Plan Tracker Live session. Joining me here once again today is the lovely Elisa James from Plan Tracker, who's our founder and managing director. Elisa, welcome to another session.
Hi Mel, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic and very excited that we're getting to do
Excellent.
part 2. I know we had so much content in part 1 to go through of our budget lockdown, get to know your NDIS funding topic, that we decided to make this into a mini series. So I'm excited and I'm hoping you are too, because today we're going to be talking about a lot of our capacity building budgets. And I know we had some questions during part 1 that we're going to be talking through live on air today. What are you most looking forward to sharing with us today, just while we wait for everyone to log in and join?
Oh, it's really interesting. There's a couple of, one budget in particular which I really love, which is the improved, oh gosh, what do we call it? It's the 09 budget. It's the
Improved social and community.
Improved social and community. Thank you. You know why I muck that up? Because I always get the I bit wrong. I always call it the wrong word. And so I was like, I'm not going to do that this time. But look, here we go. But that's one of my absolute favorite budgets, because there's a couple of, or a nice line item in there that means people can be a little bit increased. Thank you, Justine. That's why I was like, I'm sure it's not improved.
That's my bad.
But I'm looking forward to that one. That's one of my favorites. And also just talking through therapy and the difference between that improved relationships and improved daily activities or daily living budget, which is kind of all your therapy budget. But there's often a lot of confusion in that space. And so it'll be good to just chat that through.
Fantastic. Well, yes, for everyone, we did mean increased, not improved there. I apologize, because I always do that mistake as well. It's very confusing with lots of different budget names and some of them being similar, because I know there's a budget similar in core to that one. So it just comes with practice, and we are only human, so we don't always get it right. And I think that's the beauty of it. We're here and we're in this journey and on this journey with you. So a lot of the Plan Tracker team actually have lived experience either with their direct loved ones or with their extended families. So we're very excited to have these conversations with you, and we're very passionate about really just making this easier for everyone.
That's right.
So yeah, just while we've got a few more people who are just running a little bit late, we've had a few messages. So just while they're logging in, Elisa, I'm just going to pop our slides up on the screen and just do a quick recap of what we covered in part 1. So if you missed out on part 1 of the session, it's free to rewatch. We've got it up on the webinar page on the Plan Tracker website. Justine, I'll invite you just to pop a link in the chat box for everyone, and we'll do a little bit of housekeeping here as well. So if you haven't joined us for a session before, or if you just need a reminder, you can actually communicate with us in the chat or the Q&A box that you'll find inside of the Zoom platform that we're broadcasting on today. So Justine from Plan Tracker is moderating for us today, as she does most weeks. She's got lots of knowledge in there, so you can pop your questions in there. Elisa and I will park some of these questions and answer them live on air. And if we don't get to all of the questions, as we sometimes don't, because there can be a lot of them.
There's a lot of material.
There's lots and lots of value to add here today. So Elisa, let's just do a quick recap of what we covered in part 1. Did you want to run us through, or would you like me to?
Oh, I'm happy. Here we go. So I think we started by talking about roles. There's lots of different terms and different people that get involved in the NDIS space. And so we talked about what is a planner, an LAC, a plan manager, support coordinator, support worker, etc. So that was super useful. Self-directing our funding. So we talked about the different ways that budgets and plans can be managed, and that actually the same plan can often have budgets managed in different ways, which can be a bit of a new one if you haven't come across that before. We then ran through core supports and spent quite a lot of time looking at what those different budgets are for and how you can use them. So there's some great ideas in there that you might want to go back and revisit. We spoke briefly about capital budgets, capital being those great big things that we purchase. So for example, maybe a hoist or a particular type of bed, or any sort of large pieces of equipment that require an assessment and approval process. And also home modifications and where that fits, and a little bit of accommodation type questions in there as well. And I think we got to, if I'm correct, we also covered off on support coordination. and the different levels of support coordination and the types of things that support coordinators do and are great at presenting to participants. So there we go. We're ready to deep dive into the other half of the, can you believe it, 15 budgets. So let's get going.
Fantastic. All right. And just a reminder, if you have just joined us, you can catch up on part 1 or rewatch if you'd like to go through, I think it was budgets 1 through 6 we got up to, and we just touched on 7, which was support coordination. So just a recap for everyone. These are the capacity building budgets that we're going to be going through, which is why we didn't want to rush it in part 1. And we've saved this for its own little section in part 2. So our capacity building budgets are numbers 7 through 15. I know we had this question during part 1, but Elisa, I'll ask it again. Did we make the numbers up, or are they from the agency?
And they are from the agency. Some people, what you'll find is that the names of budgets on your plan, so whether you have a PDF copy or a printed copy, the names of the budgets on the plan are actually different to the names of the budgets that are used inside the NDIS portal. So that can cause a little bit of confusion. To save our team's confusion internally at Plan Tracker, we just use the first 2 numbers of the budget. And when we, as plan managers, we need to make a claim on somebody's behalf, we'll do that with an item code. And that item code is a crazy big long number that has a whole lot of meaning. But the most important part of that is the first 2 numbers, which tells you which budget it's coming from. So for example, if you were claiming a support coordination cost, the item code for that would start with 07, as you can see there on the top of the list. 07's for support coordination.
Fantastic. I love that. And just a reminder for anyone who is plan managed or agency managed, so your providers will be using those line items. You don't have to know what all of them are. We just go on that top level. If you're self-managing, you're claiming at a budget level, so you don't need to know all of those individual line items either, which is nice to know, but it's always good to have that foundation of where did they come from apart from thin air, which is always good. So let's jump right on in, Elisa. I think we're going to go straight into our employment and learning segment. So this is our budgets called Finding and Keeping a Job, or also CB employment. So capacity building is CB employment. And we also have our improved learning. So I thought we might start with a common question we get, which is, what on earth is the difference between these two?
So there's a little bit of difference here. And Mel, actually, I think you're probably an expert in this space, because for those who don't know, Mel used to work in the DES space, Disability Employment Service. So why don't you actually have a quick go at the difference there?
Fantastic.
Handing it right. I've reversed. Look at that.
I was going to say, we're bouncing back.
I could be the MC.
I love it. All right, well, I'll give this a go for everyone. So as Elisa mentioned, I used to work in the disability employment sector. So that's the DES space. And I was also at a time when TTW, or what we knew as Transition to Work, was a program. So Transition to Work existed before school leaver employment supports. It's kind of a rebadged name on the NDIS. So that falls under our Finding and Keeping a Job, or our CB employment. And it's supports that assist you to gain the skills and the confidence required to go out into the workforce and hopefully to gain employment. And they do also do supported placements. On the other side, we have our improved learning budget. So this is where you have supports for kind of career building skills. So it can be guidance and strategic goal setting and planning around the different sorts of areas that you'd like to learn that may help build your capacity. So we're thinking about capacity building budgets here. So it's building that capacity towards learning in terms of either gaining employment, but it can also be between these two budgets, which we will go through. We have our post-school option. So we mentioned our school leaver employment support. So that's a transitionary program. And Justine,
that's often called SLES, isn't it?
It is called SLES. It's not the most attractive acronym to pronounce, but it's a program, and it runs, and Justine, correct me if I'm wrong here, it runs for 1 to 2 years, and it's directly when you finish high school. So when you're transitioning from year 12 into what we call the young adult life, so transitioning from our school environment into either the workforce or into the broader community post-school. So we have what we call post-school options. Now, what that might look like is different for everyone. We always advocate for individual supports. So transitioning and from into a post-school program, it could look like going to SLES or our school leaver employment supports, but it also can be gaining supports around supporting yourself into a TAFE course, for example, or going to university as well. So there's lots of different options that we have there. Elisa, I think I have answered a bit of that difference. Do you have any questions?
That was pretty awesome, Mel. No, that was great. I think that's probably enough for where I need to sit. No, but one of the, if we pop to the next slide, what's interesting about this space is, as Mel mentioned, there's a few different options. And the great thing about NDIS funding is that it's individualized. So it's a good space to be able, for you to be able to think about if this is appropriate for you, or if you're an older person looking for support to gain entry into the workforce, that there are different options and different pathways. You're not just kind of, there's not one size fits all, which is great. We're seeing a really interesting increase in the number of people with disabilities starting to engage in micro enterprise. So really small business startups that are usually around their own special interest or skill area. And I think we're going to do a bit of a special on some of these areas in the coming months when we can squeeze it into our schedule. I know Ben Pale-Smith has started recently a clothing company, which I think we're going to pop the link to, and that's a great example of, you know, somebody being able to use their funding to develop the types of skills that they need, and also to get the supports they need around being able to start a micro enterprise. So if you have a moment and you'd like to check it out, I think we're popping his Facebook link up on there. But there are a range of different micro enterprises that people engage in, everything from, you know, desktop publishing type things, right through to gardening, through to handyman services, other things like that. So it's yeah, it's a pretty great space, I think.
I could not agree with you more, and I love the flexibility and the opportunity that it offers for a lot of participants on the NDIS to really take their passion and turn it into this kind of startup small business, sorry, and what we call a micro enterprise. Some of the micro enterprises we've seen are just fantastic, and I'd love to hear from anyone. If you have started one or you're thinking about it and you'd like to share your story with us, we would absolutely love to hear from you, and we'd be happy to share it online across our social media as well. So that would be fantastic if you want to reach out. I think Justine's popped a link up to Ben's website as well that we just discussed there. So you can go and check that out. I'm sure he'd love to have you as a visitor on his site. And I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions too, as a lot of us always are. We love questions from the community. So Elisa, I know we've got a lot of content to get through, so I'm going to move us along now to our next.
Just before we do, I might ask Justine if you can post the link. There's a new, for those who are interested, there's a new booklet out from the NDIA on Let's Talk About Work. So if that is a space that's of interest for you, grab that link. We'll pop that in the notes for later as well, and have a look on there.
Fantastic, thank you. I completely missed that one in the notes, so my apologies. And great pickup. All right, so the next budget that we'd like to have a talk about is something we're obviously passionate about, and we always talk about flexibility and self-direction. And for me, I found this is one of the most flexible options because I'm not an admin person. I don't love admin.
I can agree. That is true on Mel's behalf. Admin.
Love it. Look, it's not for everyone, and it's something that I love the idea of for participants and for our community to have this option to say, I want more flexibility, but I still want someone to do that admin piece for me. So, Elisa, we're going to go through some of the simple questions we often get asked, and the top one is it funded and how?
All right. So, plan management, of course, that's very close to our hearts. You know, it's an area we are, as Mel said, absolutely passionate about. With plan management, it's a way of managing your funding. So it's a way of being able to have the flexibility that you want to have by being able to use non-registered providers. What does that mean? There's a system in place for providers to register directly with the NDIA. So you might see, for example, a therapist is NDIA registered. Now, If your plan and your budgets are NDIA managed or agency managed, that means you can only use and you're limited to only using registered providers. By using a plan manager and having this plan management budget built into your plan, it means that you can use unregistered providers. So it means that if you want to, let's say you do need cleaning or gardening services, as a good example, you don't have to find a registered provider for cleaning or gardening. You can negotiate with the local business that provides that service, which means you may be able to, negotiate a better price, and you have a greater choice of who you choose from, which are really important things. With plan management, it's actually a legal right. So it's in the NDIA Act. NDIS Act. If you want to request plan management, what that means is you are asking for this particular budget, the Improved Life Choices budget, to be added to your plan. The NDIA fund that. It's a set fee. It's every plan manager will charge the same amount. It's a setup fee and monthly fees for processing of invoices. So it doesn't take away from your core supports. You're not having to choose between, more therapy or plan management. It's additional to your plan. So it's no direct cost to the rest of your plan, which is a great thing. You can simply request it. There are only a very few reasons that the NDIA can turn you down for plan management under law. So you just say, yes, I would like to have my plan managed, thanks. If for some reason you get your new plan and it doesn't have that budget or it doesn't say plan managed, then you go straight back to your LAC or your planner, whoever's done your plan with you, and just say, could I please have this changed over? And if you go back quickly and early, it's a very simple thing for them to change it over. If you do it in the middle of the plan, you're more likely to end up with a whole brand new plan and a plan review. So just watch out for that if you're not quite ready for plan review stage.
Fantastic. I think just to clarify for everyone there as well, in case you hear the term and you're wondering if there's a difference between going back and asking for this, that is what we call a light touch review or administrative review. So it's generally within the first 12 weeks of a plan that you can have that adjusted. We say generally because there are cases where it may go either way or it may trigger a new plan. But yes, you can definitely go back and ask for that. So Lisa, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really great to know that under most circumstances we can request this and gain the flexibility, and we're most likely to see that included in our plan, but we're not taking away from our other budgets, which is really important for everyone in the community right now, is to make sure that we have funding available to get the most out of our support. So one of the other questions that we get is, what if I do like admin and I want to do it myself? Do I have a kind of DIY mode to managing my funding?
You sure do, Mel. And of course, that's our self-management area. So self-management simply means that instead of having an organisation, a registered plan manager like ourselves, to do the claiming and paying on your behalf, you can actually do that claiming and paying yourself. So if you self-manage and you've seen the OT, for example, or the psychologist or another therapist or your support worker, you simply log on to the NDIA portal yourself, pop your claim in, wait for the funds to come in, which is usually pretty quick, and then make the payment. There's some record keeping that you need to do, and of course you need to make sure you keep a good eye on your budgets as well. So we often get asked, Mel, what's the difference between plan management and support coordination, and can I have both? And unfortunately, it's a space where even within the NDIS team, it's often LACs people who are new to that role get confused. So don't be surprised if you sometimes get different information. But basically, you can have both support coordination and plan management in your plan. The role of a plan manager is called a financial intermediary. So our job is to sit in the middle so that between the provider and the participant, we can make that financial transaction happen really easily. A support coordinator's role is to work with the participant to help them to engage the types of providers and supports that are best needed. So they're quite two very different roles. Some organisations do both. We at Plan Tracker just do plan management, and we work, quite closely every day with support coordinators across the country. But some organisations will do both, or some will just do support coordination.
Fantastic. I think it's always really good for us to clarify that there is a difference there. And just for everyone's knowledge as well, I will just add that support coordination is also funded separately. So it doesn't come out of your other support funding categories. It is funded under the 07 budget for support coordination. So has its separate amount funded there. It's really great actually if you're just getting started as well. And once again, we did cover off support coordination the week before in our part 1 of this series. So if you want to go back, you can watch that. It is in the later half of that session. Elisa, I think we might move along now to a topic that is fresh on everyone's mind throughout the community in Australia, which is in regards to therapy supports. When my slide wants to catch up, there we go. And particularly for our Victorian community at the moment, and for those who are in isolation in other areas throughout Australia, and maybe not being able to get out into the community or to access their therapy providers. So I thought we'd have a conversation around 2 of the budgets that often get a little bit confusing, what's included under them, and then we've actually got a couple of questions from the community from part 1 that we'd like to ask you, if that's all right. So I thought we might start with our first therapy budget, which is our improved daily living skills. So what exactly is this budget?
So we're actually doing them in the reverse order because it makes more sense. So this budget would be the final budget in the list of 15, or budget 15. It's also called CB Daily Activities if you have a look on your portal. And basically this is your therapy budget. So it covers off all your general kind of therapies. So all your allied health therapists. So there's a special line in there for psychology. There's one for physiotherapy, and then there's any other therapy provided by an allied health therapist. So that's things like speech, OT, art therapy, music therapy, as we like to say at the Plan Tracker office. That's actually a qualified music therapist, not just a guy with a guitar and a good idea. So there are a number of basically any of those allied health therapies fall into that space. There's the other things that can come out of this budget are also things like training for parents and carers. So if you're needing, you want to do a seminar or that type of thing and do some extra learning or get some direct training around living with disability for the other family members, there's space in there for that. There's also an item which is called Individualized Skill Development, and that comes in at about, I'm going to say $52.30. It's around about that price per hour, so it's not a hugely priced item, but it kind of is it's the space where if you are using a therapist, for example, so give you an example, if you're using an exercise physiologist, that's obviously they're going to charge probably at top therapy rates or thereabouts, close to that $199 or $193.99 per hour rate. Then what you might want to do is work with, say, one of your support workers, or if you happen to have a support worker who's also a student, an OT student or an exercise physiology student or similar, then you might be able to work with them on your off weeks and do your exercises and other things. I know just from a personal front, we've done that with our family. So we have an exercise physiologist who we now, for the first 5 weeks, we connected with twice a week. And then after that, it was like, actually, pretty much got this going now. We just need some support from our support worker. They do workouts together, and then once every 4 weeks or so, check back in, adjust the program, and away we go. And that works quite well. But again, of course, it depends on your situation and your circumstance. I mentioned therapy assistants a minute ago. Therapy assistants also come in under this category, and they're very clearly identified as people who are students of allied health. So they're currently studying at university, some of those allied health professions. but they're under the supervision, and the price guide actually says, and the professional indemnity insurance of a registered therapist. So they're usually charged at a slightly higher rate. But again, it's a great way to extend your dollar. If you are working with a therapist, you might find that some of the sessions you are able to do with a supervised student instead. If you're needing to extend your dollar, of course, not everybody's in that situation. So they're the general kind of areas that come out of that improved daily living skills budget. The other budget, which is where some confusion can come about,
and I have a question before
Oh,
we move
yes.
to that next budget. So
Sure can.
there was a recent change, and we've had a few questions online about this in the community around, does my allied health therapist need to be registered?
So they don't need, if you're, do you mean registered as an allied health therapist or as an NDIS therapist, NDIS registered?
Sorry, do they need to be registered with an allied health body or governing body? I don't know how else to explain that. So not with the NDIS.
They need to be a qualified allied health therapist. So if you are claiming for speech, they need to be a qualified speech therapist. They don't necessarily have to be registered with their own body. Each profession has slightly different peak bodies and slightly different registration process, and some don't register at all, but they do need to be a qualified allied health therapist. So art therapy is a great example. Lots of people benefit from art therapy. To be an art therapist, you have to have been to university, done a whole lot of counselling and psychology work as well, and in fact, most art therapists, I think, even end up with a master's degree. It's quite a lot of study. It's quite a very much a skilled profession, and so that in that space, you can operate as you could engage with an art therapist. That's quite different from simply saying, well, I'm just going to attend an art class, which wouldn't fit that therapy requirement. Yeah. I noticed we've got on there too specialized driver training. That's another one in there. If because of disability you require additional assistance with learning how to drive, then there is actually, you can request funding in your plan specifically for that. That is usually what we call a stated item, which means that you need to request it. It's not just one you can flexibly choose, again, assuming plan or agency management here. And it's one where it's stated. So the NDIS will actually give you in your budget, if you're allocated, a set amount for that specific purpose.
Fantastic. That's really good to know, because I know a lot of families out there that probably wouldn't know that information, and we're getting towards those age groups where we're thinking about starting to learn to drive and having those extra supports. That's fantastic. So thank you for that. It's good to know it's a stated item too that we do specifically need to request. But I'm interested to hear now about the budget that often gets a little bit kind of grey and confused with our improved daily living skills, which of course, as you would be well aware, Lisa, is our improved relationship. So what is the difference between our improved daily living and our improved relationships?
So, good question, Mel. So, improved relationships. So, this is a different budget. The specific purpose of this budget is for behaviour support plans. So, generally, that this funding or this budget area, the type of supports you'd be engaging with are people who have a qualification in behaviour support. So, it's a bit of a special budget. That can often be a psychologist, or it might be an OT or other allied health therapist, but they will have done additional training which qualifies them for behaviour support planning. And there's two line items generally that are in here. One is about developing the behaviour support plan and doing therapy along those lines, and the other is about helping to implement it and work with family and others to make the plan work. It's a special area that the NDIA Commission actually have locked down. It really would be the easiest way to say it, and the way they've done that is to make it an agency managed budget, which means that you are restricted to using NDIA registered providers. Now, the reasoning for that is that it is it is psychology or behaviour support therapy at a higher rate. So the price is a little bit higher than the other therapy rates, and it is very much a specialist area. You tend to find that this budget is granted in maybe 1 to maybe 3 plans, and then seems to drop off. Again, we're early in the scheme, so who knows where we'll end up, but that's been the experience we've seen over the many plans that we look at. And the idea being that it's a really intense, on purpose, let's put some supports around where there are complex behaviours and some further supports needed. It allows for that space to happen. And usually the outcome from that, there's a fair bit of reporting back to the agency, which is why another reason why they tend to make it or they insist upon it being a registered budget or an NDIA managed budget, so that they can get that quality of service that they're looking for. Of course, the other component to that is any time where there's likely to be, because of complex behaviours, there's likely to be what we call restricted practice. So restrictive practice is kind of, think about it like restraining somebody. So if you have a situation where, let's say you have a person with disability and they're unable to manage their behaviours in a public space, and they've needed to be restrained, and if that's going to be part of the standard approach for that person, that actually starts to contravene a whole lot of human rights legislation and bring up a whole range of other issues. And ideally, the agency would love to get to a point where there's none of that restrictive practice happening. However, this is kind of the way to manage or be across that space. And that's why this budget tends to be a lot more restricted in terms of how you can use it, and very directed.
Fantastic. That's really good to know as to why did it become restricted. I know I've seen a few questions online recently where people have been asking with plans when they're caring for a loved one, why can I only use an agency registered provider? So why do they have to be registered with the agency? So thank you so much for covering that, Elisa. Another question that we've been having recently is, when would I actually when would I request this type of support? So when would I request to have the improved relationships budget included in the plan?
Sometimes it's not that you've specifically requested it, but the LAC or the planner will have picked it up from the conversation that you've had. So let's say that whether you're the person with disability or you're the family member, either way, if the LAC or planner sees that we're starting to talk about some quite complex behaviours, then in that case, they're more likely to make a recommendation to use this budget. Look, I think there's certainly some good value in this budget. It can be used really well. Sometimes, though, it can be tricky to find the right provider, especially if there's not that many registered people in your space. And, it takes a while to build a relationship. It can often be a budget that leaves people a little bit frustrated because they're like, we've already got a psychologist we want to work with. We'd like to be able to continue to work with them. You can still work with your psychologist. You can use your therapy funding under your improved daily living budget for that. But it does sometimes, I know we speak to a number of participants who get quite frustrated at not being able to find a provider in this space. Having said that, there are some excellent providers out there. So, and your LAC will also be able to help you with a list of who they are in your local area.
Yes, always good to remember that your LAC generally would have a kind of a bank or a pool of contacts that they can help you with if you are struggling to find supports. And also that if you do have a support coordinator, they are super helpful and really great in this space at finding a provider that works well for you and to suit your needs. So the other topic that often comes up when we think about improved relationships is what we call a behaviour support plan. I know there's a lot of other words that get injected in and around this term, but if we keep it top level there at the behaviour support plans and extras, when exactly would a plan like this be implemented, and who actually implements the plan?
So those plans can look a bit different depending on the age of the person that the plan is for, and the therapist providing the plan. I've seen everything from single one-page nice simple plans through to much larger big explanations of things, which where they're used, they're the sort of thing where sometimes it helps to get everybody on your team on the same page, and rather than have a situation where you've got a challenging behavior happening and different people in your world are responding in different ways. So they can be really helpful for families to help them for everybody to know, hey, when this is happening, this is what we do. When that's happening, this is what we do, and that to try and help resolve situations. They can also be helpful for teachers, for school, for community partners as well. So, if you, I think we're picking young people today, but, if you're a young person going to youth group, it could be helpful to just help educate the people that support your young person in that space, or for an older person as well. And also for other therapists. So another way of kind of saying, okay, this is a behavior we've recognized, this is the recommended approach towards helping with this behavior.
Fantastic. I absolutely love that. That's really kind of an integrative approach to not only just being providers implementing, but also being that family approach, and to say our teachers in our community and other sorts of roles. So I absolutely love that. What I'd love to look at now that we've talked about the kind of the A and B and the two budgets that get quite confused with each other is, can we have a look at therapy supports in practice? So I've got a few community questions, which we'll get to in a moment, but I thought we might start with, if you're okay with that, Elisa, what sort of options can I think about in terms of my therapy support? So is it just that I have to go to, say, my speech pathologist or my OT, so my occupational therapist, or are there other ways I can think about implementing these supports?
Because we get the absolute privilege of speaking to so many people around the country, Mel, who are using their plans, we get to hear lots of different innovative ways that people are doing things. So obviously there's the kind of standard approach of attending a therapist's office or therapy rooms, whether that's your speechy, OT, psychologist, whoever it might be. However, there's lots of different ways to do that. So sometimes going to somebody's office doesn't work, or it gets a bit, like, I just need to mix this up a little bit. So the things that we've seen done really well that have worked for different people are things like mixing up your therapies. So maybe when you look at your budget, you say, well, I can see I've got about 25 hours this year of support, or I've got 40 hours of support, or whatever it might be in your situation. Everybody's situation is different. And you might say, I'm going to allocate 10 sessions for speech, for example. First thing to remember is that you will need a report at the end of your therapy sessions. At the end or prior to your next review, the NDIA will request that you ask your therapist for a report, and we would generally advise that you ask your therapist up front, how much time should I allow in my budget for that report? We would be expecting somewhere between an hour and 2 hours, depending on the complexity and obviously upon the situation and which therapist it is. But that generally, as a rule of thumb, seems to be about right. But it's good to know up front so you can budget for that. But you might decide to say, I want to work on something really intensely. I'm going to do a block of 10 OT sessions. Or you might do similar to the way, our family has used exercise physiology, where we've done a block of 5 weeks and now we're spacing it out and kind of working on those things in the interim with some support. So therapy blocks work really well. The other thing to think about is, how do you fit therapy into your world? Now, obviously, we're all in this crazy COVID world right now, and there's a lot of what's the word I'm after? Oh, telehealth, teletherapy. We haven't spoken about that for a few weeks, Mel. So there's a lot of telehealth and teletherapy going on, and that certainly is, in fact, in our personal situation, all our exercise physiology has been done through telehealth. We've never actually met the person face to face. So that makes life kind of interesting, but, has worked really well for us. But the other thing to think about when we're kind of out of the post-crazy COVID space is have a think about your family life and have a think about what works for the person who is accessing therapy the best. So some examples might be maybe research in your local area, who's available, are they nearby, can they do home visits? would it work for them to have you as the last appointment of the day on their home visit on the way home, if they don't regularly do home visits, but you'd still like to use that particular therapist? You might be able to, convince them that that's a great idea. And sometimes just mixing it up and having doing your therapy in a different space can work really well. So if you are doing therapy at home, then it means that you're operating in a real life setting with real life examples often of things that you're working on. It also means that you can use your local community a lot more. So you might be doing speech, but you walk down or go to the local shops and practice some of your speech and some of your communication in that space with the support of your therapist beside you. I know we've certainly used parks and the local basketball court quite a lot. At times we've done OT, or we've been to the local bike riding track with our OT. So there's really no rules around therapy has to be delivered in this particular way. You can be quite innovative, and even suggest some ideas to your therapist about things you might like to do.
That's really great. I really like the innovative approach there. And obviously, we are in a COVID climate, so I'd like to address some of the questions. And I know we've had a few coming in, and thank you to those in the community who are also replying to others' questions in the chat box right now.
I'm not allowed to read the chat.
We have banned Elisa from reading
but
chat.
I can see Wendy Zanin.
So
hello, Wendy
is in here. We've also, Katie's replied back here. So Katie, I'm going to stem off what you've popped in there. Thank you very much for this. Elisa, if we're looking at accessing, especially during COVID, as we are right now, teletherapy supports, can I buy a device? I'm going to ask it. You know it was coming.
It's like a trip down memory lane. I think we said the word iPad and device 500 times a day at least for about 3 months there. It was pretty intense.
I think we were dreaming of it.
That's right. In fact, we have 1.5 people fully allocated just to handling device inquiries certainly at the peak for about 7 weeks there. It was crazy. Yes, you can. So there's some caveats around that. I think, do we have some of that information up on no, it's not up on our website, is it, Mel?
I think we've got it in another session. So we do have some information on that. What we can do is over the coming week, I can send everyone just an up-to-date article on where that stands as of right now, because it does change. Anyone who followed us along in the early session would have realized it pretty much changed weekly. So
let me give you the headlines. And then if you are a Plan Tracker customer and you've got questions, just drop us an email and we will send you the latest what you need to do. But the answer is, if you don't have another device that is available for teletherapy, and the NDIA gets you to just answer 7 quick questions about, is there another device available? Is this going to actually work for you, etc. There's a few of those questions in there. So if you don't have another device, you can purchase a device up to the value of $750. I know that's different to the standard $1,500 price cap for low cost, low risk. This is a special COVID policy from, Justine, you're a champion. There you go. This is special COVID policy from the NDIA. You do need to have a supporting letter from a therapist stating which device you need and why. And if you have all of those things in place and an invoice to pay for the device, if you're plan managing, of course, then you can simply send that in and have your claim taken care of. So, but if you've got any questions specific to your situation, please do reach out to us if that's for us, or to your other plan manager, or if you're self-managing, just make sure you've still got that documentation around just to say why you needed that device.
Lovely. And to make it even easier, if your therapy provider is looking to provide you with that written advice, we actually have a free downloadable template that is on the lovely link that Justine has shared in the chat box. I'm sorry, I forgot that we posted that up there. We've been through so many topics recently. So we do have some information around that. As always, if you do have questions specific to your individual situation, please feel free to reach out to us. But your therapy provider can use that template. So it has everything in terms of the information they need to supply to support your application to purchase that through your funding. So that's nice and easy and makes it so much easier than going from scratch, because that can take a while to go, what do I need to write in this if I'm the therapy provider to ensure that I'm supporting my participant with the best possible application to use their funding for a device during this time. So another question that we've had, Elisa, which I'm going to stem off this. So Bree asked this during part 1. So thank you, Bree, for this question. So during lockdown, so Bree, I'm going to assume you may be in Victoria, or you may be in an area of the community that you can't, you may be in isolation in another area of the Australian community. So Bree has asked Elisa that I would love some tips on how to spend my CB daily living funds whilst we're in lockdown. So what sorts of supports or how can I access while we're in lockdown?
Yeah, so with that, I think, Bree, always our advice would be that, we can only give general comments because we really don't know your specific situation. But talk to your therapists as well. So it might be that they have some other ideas on things that you can do that will help you keep moving forward with therapy. I guess virtual really is kind of the best approach in lockdown. We've actually kept some of the on a personal front. We've kept a lot of our virtual supports going, even though being in New South Wales, we're not in lockdown at this stage, although we do still work on lots of social distancing. But just an example of that I've heard of is where a young person is struggling to get out of bed, really dealing with just frustrated by life and all the rest of it, and finding it hard to engage with therapists. You can purchase some fitness equipment through your funding. It provided again that it meets your plan goals, and it does meet those requirements for spending your funding that we always talk about in Participant Guidebook 3. So, if you didn't have a disability, would you need this kind of question? So an example of one thing that we've seen happen is where the person ended up, their family purchased a Fitbit for them to get them up and moving, to try and make moving a bit more fun, purchased a Fitbit, grabbed their support worker on the phone, said, right, off you go for a walk. So the two of them went and virtual support worker on the phone, person with the Fitbit watch, and they were able to go out and get outside the front door and go for a walk. So, that's kind of a pretty, you might not necessarily think of that one up front, and of course it depends on your unique situation. But remember that in the therapy budget, there's funding for therapists, funding for trainers, for carers and parents. There's also that individualized skill development. So you could potentially, use a therapy assistant or use your support worker and still claim from that budget, and do things like, have the person on an iPad virtually zoomed in, or FaceTime or similar, supporting someone to make a snack, or supporting someone to engage in a conversation, or etc. And those things, whilst you can't do them face to face, and they might not look like they always look like, they can provide a little bit of relief for everybody, and a little bit of external when it can be quite tricky for people with disability to be able to engage outside of the family.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Elisa. And Brie, I hope you found that helpful. I know you've got a couple more questions going on in the chat box there. I'll invite Justine to reply to you, and we will personally follow up with you after the session today. We've got lots of valuable content still to get through though. So Elisa, without further ado, I think we're going to move along to a topic that we need to have a conversation about, which is PPE, or what's known as personal protective equipment. So for those in the Victorian community, especially right now, there have been specific guidelines from the Victorian government around clarifying what types of PPE and how to use them appropriately and effectively. So Justin will pop a link up for everyone. But Elisa, I thought we'd have a generalised conversation. I know that in New South Wales, it's strongly urged to wear one. It's not compulsory right now. In Victoria, it is currently compulsory. So what exactly is PPE, and what types of PPE should we be thinking about? So obviously, first one we all think about is probably a mask. What other sorts of PPE equipment would we see?
So again, it depends on your unique situation. And I know we say this all the time. It's best to be guided by your medical professionals as to what you need and what might be specific for your situation. But the big changes that have come through are that there's now the introduction of new line items out of core to help cover some of that cost. So I believe that's both for Victoria and also for New South Wales
It is indeed.
at the moment. So what that means is from the 31st of July, those items have come in. It means that, let's say your support worker turns up and they are wearing disposable PPE, gloves, mask, etc. Or even if they have additional cost of washing, if they want to, whatever it might be, those sorts of, the purchase of that extra equipment can now be covered out of your plan. So when they invoice, if they've paid for that themselves and they're going to on charge it to you, that claim can now be made from your plan. Obviously, that's with, as we always say, communication and have a conversation up front. Nobody likes surprises. Well, unless they're nice surprises. Usually not invoicing surprises. And then the other item code there is that if you are the person with disability and you need to purchase some PPE for yourself to be protected from, say, a variety of workers coming into the house or into your home, then you can also do that. So both of those, just to, keep it interesting, of course, they're two completely different line items, one from consumables, that's for your purchase if you're the person with disability, and one from the O1 budget if you are the worker who's now is charging that on to the customer.
It's definitely great to see those line items added. And I just want to update the dates. I apologise for the typo on the screen here. So it came in effect on the 29th of July 2020, and these new line items specifically for PPE, at present, they are in effect until the 30th of September. So as that is updated, we will, of course, keep the community informed on that. Now, Elisa, in terms of providers accessing this, if they've got questions around what line items, who do they ask? Is there somewhere that they can go?
There's actually a whole lot of, obviously they can ask plan managers. We're always a great source of information on things like this. So if you're not sure and you have got a friendly plan manager, feel free to reach out. But there's also a lot of good, useful information on the NDIS website about some of these changes. So if you simply go to the NDIS website, PPE, you'll see some of the updated changes in there around item codes as well.
Lovely. Alrighty. Now we've got a couple of questions.
But actually, just on that, Mel, if you are a provider, you don't have to put a line item or an item code on your invoice. That is something you just put in a description of what it is that you're charging for. In this case, Victoria PPE, and put your amount in, and a good plan manager will work that out.
I was going to say that's where our account team, so our price guide nerds, come into play in the plan tracker plan management team, because they will know exactly what codes to pop on that for each individual. So Elisa, thank you so much for that. We've got a couple of questions, and I know we've probably got just under 10 minutes to go, and I want to loop back around to a conversation that we briefly touched on in part one, which is psychosocial recovery coaches. So there's been some community questioning around this, and I'll just pop our contact details up on the screen for a moment. So if you are looking to reach out to us, you can reach us here or jump on our website. There's lots and lots of ways to get in touch, and you can of course join our Facebook community as well, which is the NDIS Self-Direction community. So find us online. We'd love to have you there. But Elisa, psychosocial recovery coaches, can we just recap quickly what exactly that is and how is it different to a support coordinator?
Okay, so this is a new concept or a new support that the NDIA has announced or launched, if you like, on 1 July. So as the new price guide came out for the new financial year, we started to hear about psychosocial recovery coaches. And what that means is there's basically some new line items sitting in under that support coordination budget. There's a great booklet that the NDIS has put out. When I say great booklet, there's a booklet that the NDIS has put out, which has some interesting information in it, and is quite well presented. And it's all on psychosocial recovery coaches and what they cover. But what we know so far is this, that if you are engaging with a psychosocial recovery coach, we're going to have to find a shorter name for that, then you won't also be eligible for support coordination. So the NDIS said it's one or the other. At the moment, it's an interesting space. We haven't seen very many providers jumping up and down and saying, yes, we're going to provide this service. It's probably going to take a while to see that filter through. And possibly one of the reasons for that is just the price point positioning of that item. So what they're saying is that this is a service that should be delivered by people who have either some lived experience around psychosocial recovery or have some training. So I think it's a minimum of 2 years worth of training in that mental health space. So it's a space that organisations or individuals will need to recruit for, probably, to meet that criteria. But it is priced a lot lower than support coordination is right now. So there's a bit of a disparity there. So it's priced around the $70 mark per hour, as opposed to that, we had 102 for social support coordination.
I'm sure
now.
Justine will answer that for everyone.
Justine is actually a closet price guide nerd. There we go. Good job, Justine. She's working on the link to the recovery document. Excellent. But the end result is that at the moment, there really isn't quite the right pricing there to make it probably a viable option en masse as a service, is what we're hearing from providers. It does look, though, that some services along these lines would be super helpful. So we're really hopeful that the agency will probably might make some adjustments, and that the provider community will also hopefully be able to look at ways that that this type of service could be provided.
Lovely. And just to be clear, because I know this question has come up and it did in part one as well from one of our community members, having funding for I'm going to say this completely wrong, a psychosocial recovery coach, we really need to make a shorter version of that. So if I have funding for the psychosocial funding,
Coach.
I'm going to go, psychosocial coach, so it comes under the support coordination budget, is that correct?
It does, yeah.
Can I be funded for both a psychosocial coach as well as a support coordinator?
The answer from the agency at the moment is no. We haven't, and in fact, I don't think we as yet have even seen any funding come through specifically as a stated item and again, stated item being in your plan, it'll say stated in capitals, and that means that money can only be used for those item codes. We do sometimes see that for support coordination. So whether it'll just be left open and general and people can choose which services they use, or whether they're going to make it specially stated, we're yet to see.
Lovely. All right. And I'd just like to put an open call out. If you are a provider and you either are or are intending to provide the psychosocial recovery coaching, I'm never going to get that word. You are intending to provide that service, we would love to hear from you to go on our database so that we have providers that we can reference to who are providing these supports all throughout the Australian community. So we are a national plan manager, so it's always good to note, doesn't matter where you are in the community, we would absolutely love to hear from you and connect and have a conversation. So please reach out to us. Elisa, I've got two more questions.
I think we've got a couple of, I think there's a couple of WA companies and providers that we know are starting to. So we'll do some more research and see if we can dig them out of the woodwork for everybody.
Fantastic. All right. We had another question last week, which was around planning meetings. So there was some kind of trial regions going on here where a participant would meet with the local area coordinator and with the planner for a meeting in kind of a collaborative approach, if you like, to go through and kind of finalise the plan in that meeting. Is that still going to take place or still on the table?
I think, Mel, you have far more information than I do. I'm going to pass that one right back to you, but that certainly sounds like a great idea and sounds like what the Tune report was talking about. The Tune report, which was released earlier this year, and one of the recommendations was to make that a more transparent process so that the person doing the planning is actually connected in a much better way to the person whose plan it is.
Fantastic.
And allowing for review of plans before they're made live, which would just save so much angst.
It definitely would. So the information that I have, which is actually from Justine, so thank you, Justine, for this information. which is that, yes, it's still on the cards. So they are still intending this. COVID obviously has kind of put a pin in it, if we like. So it slowed down that process. But as far as we're aware, the agency is continuing with the intention to continue trialing first, and then if it is effective, to roll this out. So we will, of course, keep you informed. I just thought I'd ask Elisa and see if she had any more information, but that's all good.
Sorry, I got nothing.
It's perfectly fine. I know we touched on this earlier in regards to art and music therapy, but our increased social and community participation, and you'll note there I did not say improved because I'm reading it and cheating, but
I know, and I noticed that you didn't even give me a slide. This is my favorite budget. How did we miss the slide?
Well, I thought we could potentially do a whole topic on this one. So
okay.
I thought I'd save it, but I wanted to
All right.
touch on this quickly. So what can this budget be used for?
Okay.
Budget 9.
So anything in the capacity building range differs from core in that core is about your everyday needs. So you'll note that there's a social, economic, and community participation budget, 04, in core. That's kind of like your everyday, I'd like to go and do this, but I'm going to need some support to do it. And that's what that budget covers. The 09 budget coming in under capacity building means that you're looking at ways to improve or increase what you're able to do because of the use of that funding. So whilst there's some really traditional type thinking in that space around, say, let's use an example around increasing your ability to operate in a social setting. So you might join a social group or a social skills type group training being presented by a psychologist or something like that, which can be really super helpful. Any parents who are wanting to use programs like, what's it called? Secret Agent Society, that's the one. Secret Agent Society, it can be a great program for many people. School age kids, I think it's generally older primary school type age group it's aimed at, but it doesn't fit very nicely under the therapy line items and amounts. It gets a bit tricky trying to fit that in because there can be some extra costs in there. So you might find that you're able to negotiate and get that actually funded through this 09 budget. And the reason is there's this lovely little item code in there which doesn't have a price limit. And so it's about innovative use of innovative supports to engage in social and community situations. So it's a sort of space where you can use that funding to basically try some new things and build some new skills. And so it might be that you think, well, I want to engage with my community more. How could I do that? So I've seen people use it for things like, use it for, say, going and doing, learning a new skill like tennis. So doing some private tennis lessons where you're learning the skill of playing tennis. You're not able to engage in the group at this point for a whole range of disability-related reasons, but you need some skills in that space. You might take your support worker along at the same time. You could use that funding to cover the cost of the support worker, the cost of the activity, which is quite nice. Whereas covering the cost of the activity can be quite tricky out of core often. So it's a good budget for that. And obviously the outcome from that is that you then may be able to join a group tennis lesson, which gives you that opportunity to engage and make some friendships. And then down the track, play socially. So you're looking for how can you use that budget to help improve your options to engage with your community down the track. So really, it's a great space to pursue your special interest with a view that it's going to help you engage more broadly in your community.
Fantastic. And there is just one little question off there that I'd love to ask you quickly. I know we are very short on time here. Mainstream courses, are they also covered, or does it have to be a disability-specific course?
Again, you need to look at your specific plan and your specific goals. So it's a terrible day when all we do is fund things that have the word disability attached to them. The whole point of individualized funding and engagement in community is to be able to use mainstream supports. So again, it will depend on how your plan is funded, and that's why, this 09 budget can be so helpful. So there is a line item in core that does allow for some group activity type engagement, but it does say where there is an extreme risk of social isolation if you don't do that. So generally, if you're looking at your core funding, it's generally for the purpose of a person assisting you to attend a mainstream course, event, group, whatever it might be. So it's the support that's needed for you to be able to engage in that space if that's what you'd like to do. Whereas that 09 budget is really useful because it also very clearly states that it will cover the cost of the activity, which might be a camp, it might be a course, it might be membership to something. It's very clearly stated for, or stated's the wrong word because that has other stated connotations, but it's very clearly documented that that's what it covers. So if you are wanting to do a mainstream type course and have it funded through your plan, just make sure to point that out and request that 09 budget rather than just through your core in general.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elisa, and a huge thank you on behalf of the community for taking the time for part 1 and part 2 of this series of our budget lockdown, get to know your NDIS funding. Once again, for anyone, if you would like to watch part 1, that will also be, is also available already in our library. So part 1 and part 2 will be available there. You can watch them anytime or rewatch them, and they will also have closed captioning. Elisa, thank you so much for joining us here today, and Justine for moderating in the chat box. And to the community, we really appreciate your time, whether you've joined us live or you are watching a replay. As always, if you'd like to get in touch with the Plan Tracker team, or you are looking for a plan manager or a self-management app, you can give us a call on 1-800-549-670 or email our team at hello@plantracker.com.au. And until next time, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. I think we're looking at a fortnight at the moment with another fantastic session, and I'm sure answering lots more of your questions. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you on another session sometime soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.